Good afternoon. This is the December 6th, 2022 short-term rental task force meeting. We're normally we would have Jeff Adams running this. Unfortunately, he's not available today. He's at a North Coast housing meeting in Seaside this afternoon. So I'm not 100% sure how you guys normally run these.
Well, Jeff usually runs it. And he typically works his way down the agenda.
Is there a vice chair that?
No, there's no chair.
There's no chairs.
Well, in that case, I'll just start with our presentation and
It's probably best.
Yep. It's usually where he starts.
let's get this thing work. Do that. Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, so on our agenda, we have code enforcement. We have some legislative discussions, and I understand that we have a couple people who may be commenting this afternoon. And then we're also going to have some discussion about potential policy updates related to regional and workforce housing, TSP and parking, and code audit. And Emily, could you unlock that door? I thought I had it unlocked.
Decided I needed to clean up my pantry. Don't know why, but.
Okay, so just to recap, the mission is to maintain the residential character and livability in neighborhoods and prevent the adverse effects of transient occupancy of dwelling units on residential neighborhoods. And just moving into our areas of analysis as far as whether or not the city is seeing an increase in short-term rental activity, whether we're seeing an increase in STR influence complaints. Are there any current issues with the program? And what are the residential neighborhood impacts of the program and the financial impacts of the program? At present, and this is as of September 2022, but there hasn't been a significant change in the number of rentals since that time. There are approximately 198 active permits. 137 of those are 14-day, 16 are 5-year, and 14 are lifetime unlimited permits. Sorry, I'm trouble with technology here. And so as you can see, the trend since August of 2015, there hasn't been a significant change. We're still hovering approximately around the 200 mark.
Now, you said that there's been a significant change?
No, there has not been a significant change.
I missed that. Good.
No, there hasn't been a significant change. The
Yeah.
thing that we're primarily seeing is a decrease in the 5-year unlimiteds. That's because we're no longer issuing those.
Yeah.
And then moving into the code enforcement section, we're joined by Luke Williams, our code enforcement officer.
Yeah, so Jeff's compiled all of my data, does some lovely charts for us here. This, I believe, reflects the total number of complaints. These are not all short-term related. These are just all of the complaints that have come through the code.
You know, as of what date?
I just passed to my latest thing. It would be as of the last week or so. About 50-50 internal, external. Further breakdown of that, Internal being anyone in the city, myself, Public Works, Planning, Finance, and then external would be citizen or anonymous. The type of contact they received from me. So this kind of breaks into the short-term rental thing. So it looks like there's been 7 short-term rental complaints or cases taken for about 4% of my total caseload. So not a great portion of what I've been working
And
on.
over a period, what's the period of time?
I believe he's looking, I believe he's looking at since I came into this position. Yeah.
So to clarify, what constitutes a complaint? Because previously, like one address had multiple complaints about the same thing, it only counted as one.
Right. So this complaints is probably a poor word. These are cases that I've opened.
Okay, so that's different than complaints.
Yeah, maybe that was poorly worded. These are cases, I believe Jeff's the one who compiled this data, but I believe these are the cases that I opened.
So each case could constitute multitude of complaints in
Correct.
reality.
Correct. Yeah, but it's one short-term rental issue that's going on. Yeah. So then recently, pending or for one of the last meetings, there was a desire to see if the cases that I took were related to short-term rentals. So if it's a parking complaint, I'll put it in as a parking case, whether or not it's at a short-term rental location. So I believe that's what this graph here is showing, is that short-term rentals, or at least cases that I take, if they pertain to short-term rentals, it's close to that 25, that's 28.6% there. So more of a quarter of the caseload.
And then this is the updated map of short-term rentals across the town. This is available on the City of Cannon Beach website.
I just have a question for Officer Williams. If somebody calls, say there's a drunken party going on or something, do you note that that's at a short-term rental or not at a short-term rental? So you categorize each one of those?
Yeah, that's what I was trying to explain. So if it's a noise complaint, it's a noise complaint. And then I've added a new column to my spreadsheet that marks it as short-term rental related or not. And so then I would put yes if it is at a short-term rental, but the case would be a noise complaint. Yeah. So hopefully that better reflects things.
Is that online too, that last chart that showed how many of the other complaints were short-term rental related? That is, do we have a copy of that graph?
The presentation will be posted online. I haven't had a chance to put it up yet.
Okay.
Yeah, but it'll go onto the short-term rental page on the city's website.
I just think it would be helpful if the charts were better labeled, because the one, like the complaint one is open cases. So it'd be better if it was labeled open cases. And the one, that last chart you put up, it would be better if it was labeled. I mean, just so people could understand what it was. You know, calls relate, well, I guess you have STR related. That's good enough.
Or located at a short-term rental.
That would be much better. Just so people, because we have you here to explain it, but if someone was going on the website and wanted to see the information, it just seems that it's better to have much clearer headings on it so people know exactly what they're looking at.
We can work on that.
Yeah,
I have a question, Officer Williams. You said there are 7 open cases.
These are not open cases. These are cases that I have worked.
Okay.
There's 2 or 3 open short-term rental cases that I have right now.
Okay, so the cases that you closed out of that 7, were they were they valid or invalid or
There's been some of each. Yeah.
some of each?
Yeah.
We had that graph last time. I
Yeah, we
think.
had that graph the last time.
Okay.
I think that's just as important to know whether they're a valid complaint or not valid.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Well, or he was able to show that it happened, because certainly some of them probably did happen, but there was no evidence.
Right.
that
Yeah.
it happened.
Yeah. And it can be difficult. I know I took a complaint maybe a month ago or something like that of someone who had reported something that happened over Hood to Coast weekend. There's no way for me to validate if that happened or not. So it's neither unfounded nor founded. It's, case taken. Thank you. I'll, keep an eye on it or something like that.
Well, I think it still rises to the level of a complaint. Whether it's valid or not, it's a complaint.
Definitely.
It takes up your time is what I'm getting at.
Mhm.
It takes up the officer's time. And most likely whoever's complaining, they're not getting anything out of complaining. I mean, it takes their time and so forth. So I would say we could err on the side of it's probably a valid concern.
It was.
Definitely. Yeah.
At least it takes up your time anyway.
And we probably can't do this, but it would totally be interesting to know if their property is managed by a management company or not. Because
yeah.
my guess is we would find they're the ones that are not.
That's possible. Yeah.
That would be an interesting, and that should be easy because it's all on the permit, whether they're who their local representative is.
Yeah, whether a management company or not.
Right.
I could add that in to cases if they are short-term or if they take place at a short-term rental address. I'll add one for if they're privately managed or professionally. Would that be, yeah, okay.
And I noticed in the police log that my neighbor had renewed her business license for her Airbnb, and however you guys found that out, that was awesome. That you went and put that screw on.
Which is appropriate.
Yes.
Absolutely appropriate.
It's totally.
Well, you did a lot of business license, it looked like.
Yeah, well, they all tend to renew around the same time.
Yeah.
It's easy to.
It was interesting
Yeah.
seeing that list.
Business licenses are July 1.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on, again, we have that map of where these are located around the city. This gets updated periodically as new information comes available. And then moving into some of the legislative issues. I'm trying to get that out of the way. So moving into local representation, and I thought we were going to be joined by somebody here today who wanted to talk about this. But there has been some expression of interest in changing local representation to being an individual who permanently resides within 10 vehicular miles of Cannon Beach rather than within the Cannon Beach urban growth boundary. And so this is something that may come up as a discussion topic during any code revisions that would be happening over the next year or so. So this might be an opportunity for feedback from the task force regarding how comfortable you would feel with changes to the area in which a local representative could come from.
Well, local representative has to respond to a complaint
Correct.
in a timely manner.
Correct. And that's where 10 vehicular miles could still be considered timely.
Yeah, given the time of year.
Yeah.
Well, would it let out, isn't there a company in Nehalem? Or no?
Nehalem is more than
Or
10 miles.
Manzanita,
Manzanita. There's several companies.
Demands it.
and is that more than 10 miles?
Yep.
Why make this change? I'm curious.
Like I said, there's just been some inquiry from members of the public. This is not a change that we're proposing. This is just an idea, to my understanding, that would be potentially brainstormed during a code revision.
Yeah, I'm just curious, but what I'm asking is when you propose something like this, there's usually a reason for it. So I'm just curious what the rationale is.
Well, the rationale is that we have a property owner who wants to be the local contact for their short-term rental, but they don't live directly within the urban growth boundary. And so they're looking to see if there could be any sort of changes to the ordinance that would permit people out of a slightly larger geographic area be local representatives.
Okay, like, so someone living in Arch Cape who is renting a house here and wants to be their own representative.
Correct. That's a great example.
There has to be two, right?
No, it's only one. That's where I think the biggest change needs to come to this paragraph. Is that I believe that you should have to have two
I think so.
local representatives. Being for the reason that I'm a local rep and I go on a cruise and is gone, well, then there's nobody in town. And I think that's where some of the bigger issues have been is I really believe there should be two local reps required. Yeah, unless they're with a management company, because professionally managed, there's multiples, but if you're self-managed, I truly believe you need to have two local reps.
I think we talked about that. You don't even have to be on a cruise, you could be on a Blazer day.
Right. You could be anywhere. You could be out at a movie in Seaside. And I mean, that's where I see the flaw in the local rep across the country is that when you only require one, there's nobody as a backup.
I agree with that.
For what it's worth, in my experience, I haven't had trouble reaching a local representative when I needed to, but that's still a good idea. I think that's beneficial.
But that doesn't mean that they're here.
True. Yeah.
Follow up on Brian's point, you know, you go 10 miles in any direction and given the right weather or accident circumstances, whether it's on 26 or even in Seaside with the flooding and so forth, somebody might not be able to get here timely. Even though it's only 10 miles, we're talking about weather events could really affect how much time it takes for them to get here versus living right in Cannon Beach.
That's true.
So Mike, I have a question about like the purpose of this is to be able to have that local representative to respond to an issue, correct?
Yes.
That's
To be
correct.
here. So Officer Williams, how many times when you contact the local representative is it needed and required that they be able to come to the property and deal with the issue? Is that a big problem or is it not a big problem?
No, the most times I've contacted a local rep is to get the guest register or something like that. If there's a noise complaint, if you can deal with it with the party, then the officers will just do that. I think it hasn't been very urgent for them to come to the property, in my experience.
I don't know. I wonder, should our police be spending their time policing short-term rentals? I mean, the complaint is one thing, but it really is the responsibility of the owner of the short-term rental to take care of a noise complaint or garbage strewn about or something like that. We shouldn't have to have our police doing those things. I don't know. It just seems that should be handled by the rep.
And the other case of an emergency, I know we have the water protection plan, but a water leak, or if there's a fire or not emergency affecting other people's livability, be an emergency with the house. Why would you leave your house unprotected?
Oh, I totally agree with that. I was just wondering how often that is required based on Officer Williams' experience, just for clarification.
If we can, I don't know that we make changes to this data or to this document or not, but do we make a motion to add a second one, or is that a city decision? How do we go forward with this?
This would be a legislative amendment, so this wouldn't be something that the short-term rental task force would be making motions to change. It would be more of an opportunity to provide feedback during a code revision process.
Right.
So as we're getting in there and we're getting into the public commentary phase, then members and or the task force as a group can make commentary and weigh in on any kind of language revisions.
I have another question. We were talking about events day being in Manzanita and it being greater than 10 miles. Nothing against them, but why was that allowed?
I think they have a local number, don't they?
They have a local person that lives here in Cannon Beach.
Okay, and I would suggest we rewrite it. I don't think that the paragraphs says that's acceptable. It says the company has to be located, not that a representative is there. I could be wrong, but that was what I read. A
No,
physically
in there-
staffed
in-
office.
With physically staffed office.
Right. Well, the way it reads is if you manage yourself, then you have to have a local rep. If you're done by a property management company, you have to have an office within 10 miles.
And the one in Manzanita is not within 10 miles.
10 miles, right.
They do have a rep, and I understand that, but if we're going to allow that, that's going to have to be amended, or they're going to have to put an office in Cannon Beach.
So
I
right
think if you
now,
look at the fourth sentence down, it'll
Okay.
answer your question. The owner may be the designated representative where the owner permanently resides within 10 vehicular miles for the change of the Cannon Beach urban growth boundary. So all they're saying is rather than living in Cannon Beach, if you're an owner designated representative, then they'd like to live 10 miles, up to 10 miles away rather than in Cannon Beach.
Right, and
So-
I understand that change, but it still doesn't address that the sentence says above there that an office must be physically staffed within 10 vehicular miles if it is a licensed property management company. I'm not talking about the owner
Oh,
taking
okay.
care of it. I'm talking about the company. If we're going to allow that, Avance Day isn't following the rules. That's all.
Point well taken.
Okay, I don't have any information about that. I'm not really involved much with the management of the short-term rentals. That was typically something that was handled by Katie and will ultimately be handed over to Emily, our new admin.
Welcome to the fire.
That is something I'll definitely take down as a note for us to talk about and look into. All right, anything more about local representation before moving on?
Was this put before us because they want our recommendation or?
This is just something that might be getting talked about as we go through a revision. So there's nothing formally that exists yet. This is more of a informal, it might come up as we go through the code audit.
Well, I'm assuming since somebody's put the effort into rewording this, that that's going to be the case. But my question, I guess, that you can or cannot answer now, but looking forward, if this does move forward through the code audit or through the council, are they going to want the STR group's input?
I think that would be valuable, yes.
Because if they are, then I think we should plan on discussing this through and preparing that input, is the point I'm getting at.
I think we're pretty much in agreement that if it's local representation, there should be two local contacts, aren't we?
I think so.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. I mean, the management companies already have
Oh,
that
for
kind of
sure.
thing in place. That's not an
Right.
issue. It's the single owners
Right,
that have the issue. And so I think two for those folks is
right.
appropriate.
I mean, my neighbor, she lived in Long Beach when she was renting out her house, and she has a business here in town, so she gave the business address and phone number, but she wasn't working because she took the summer off. So in reality, she wasn't even close. So a second number would have been really handy.
And Brian, you live outside of town. You get in
Yes.
town, you do, I mean, you have gotten to our house at 2 a.m. in the morning.
Takes me about 10 minutes, takes me 10 to 12 minutes to get into town from where I'm at, out on Highway
So,
26.
So I personally don't see that them living within 10 miles is a problem. I do
No.
think there should be two if it's personal representatives.
Well, especially if one was required to be in town for the individuals, and one could be within the 10 vehicular miles or something like that.
I think if you have two people designated for one house,
Right.
I don't think it matters whether they're in town or within 10
10
miles.
miles.
Right.
I just
It's
think-
basically the same.
Yeah.
So somebody tidy that statement up and write it down.
Okay, well, I've been taking some notes about the discussion, so that's something that we could, that we can discuss internally and like I said, incorporate into any sort of proposed text amendments, but this isn't anything that would be happening immediately.
That sounds good.
And you've already got this thing I was complaining about, so the events day thing, you've got that written down. So that's taken care of. All right.
Okay, let's go on.
Okay, moving into another potential legislative change would be geographic and proximity of rentals. And so this is something that is commonly practiced in other communities such as Seaside. They're a very good example where they try to limit the density of short-term rentals in their neighborhoods by having either a proximity such as no more than, they have to be 200 feet apart or something like that, or there can't be more than, somewhat percentage within a given area.
Way back when, we used to have that in here. And I don't know what happened to it. It was in here a long time ago, but it has since disappeared.
Well, I think geographically, I'm not going to be popular amongst some people, but I think areas like your neighborhood, areas like Haystack Heights, I don't see a reason for short-term rentals
I don't either.
in those neighborhoods.
I don't either.
I'm as a management company who that's how I make my living. I refuse homes in those two areas on a regular basis.
How come?
They're full-time residential community. Those are areas that are more full-time people than second home owners. And so the impact of a short-term rental is far more significant in an area like that, and it's unnecessary.
Well, we've got kids out riding their bikes.
Yeah.
If we have strangers speeding through there,
Yep.
it's a problem.
No, what about full-time residents who live in areas with high density short-term rentals? Think of
Sorry,
how
Lisa, you're gonna have to move east of the highway with.
Lisa, I'm not against density control
No.
I mean, we've never been against that. I think that if that's something that the city wants to go towards, that's a very operable thing to do.
We've had it before. It was way back when this whole thing went down back in, when was it? It was 5.
Yeah, it was before me.
There was a density piece to it, but it disappeared somewhere along the line. I don't remember when, because you had to notify homeowners within 100 feet of the residence that was going to be designated as a short-term rental. I don't know if that's even still in place or not.
I'm not sure.
I don't think so.
So,
Sure.
yeah, see, that piece went away too. But it used to have a kind of a density thing where people were notified, and if it got too dense, it was just kind of said, no, there's enough people on the street, sort of thing. It was a little more casual back then perhaps, but it did happen. And I think it's not unfair to consider that again.
It does seem like a lot of towns have that, where oceanfront, it's 100%. But then as you move back, it's
Yeah.
less and less. And the story in paper this morning, there was something about Long Beach, Washington, implementing exactly this, the density thing.
Well, I think it's a very good idea to have a density cap.
Yeah.
So that way the neighborhoods that are inundated with short-term rentals it doesn't get worse for them. It makes total sense. And the fact that other communities are doing it sort of
Right.
exemplifies that it is a problem, a recognizable problem. And I don't see any reason why Cannon Beach should be more lax on the issue than other communities.
It'd be interesting to see the old rules.
Yeah.
And see if that would be appropriate to go back to, or just change that a little bit. We get.
I don't remember that rule, but it may have been way before my time. When you say it used to be, I don't know how long ago.
Yeah, I want to say it was back in the early 2000s.
04, 05.
5,
Yeah.
06, somewhere in there.
Huh.
I have a
'cause
question.
seen it.
that in the language here in this document, it says greater than 40% rentals won't be in the area will be allowed. Has anyone looked to see if we have 40% rentals on any streets? I know we have second owner homes, and I know we have rentals combined that would make 40%, but do we have 40% anywhere in town that is
Yeah.
strictly rental? Yeah,
My-
besides your street, I know your street is bad, but that would be the first thing to look at. I agree there should be restrictions. Is this restrictive enough considering how many maybe second home as well? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't believe we've done the GIS analysis on that. One of the things we would have to do is figure out where our kind of analysis areas would be, because when you say 40% of surrounding properties, okay, what are the boundaries of that? So we would have to determine where our neighborhood boundaries are going to be, how large they are, and then start determining what the density is within those areas, and also try to minimize any kind of clumping around edges, which would create kind of an interesting density, if that makes sense. So no, I don't believe we've done that, but that's something we could certainly look into doing.
Do we have like hotel zones? Like properties next to hotels can have one night rentals or something?
Well, if they're in a hotel zone, they can.
So what is a hotel zone?
It's a designated area in the overlay. So, you can't do anything. It's like the Sandcastle condos down in Tolovana. That's a hotel zone.
Well,
And
and
that's
that's
primarily a full-time residential occupation.
right, because that's what I was thinking, near the Tolovana Inn, they built those new houses on the ocean front, and somebody told me, oh, they're in the hotel zone. And I didn't even know what that was.
Everybody did.
Yeah, no, the lodges, the Inn at Cannon Beach, those are a hotel zone. The only area that's not really, I mean, you can pretty much tell the hotel zones in town. North Spruce over by the public parking lot, that street, oceanfront, I think both sides is hotel zone.
I think it is too. Yeah.
Larch, behind Coaster Theater, part of that is hotel zone.
Yep.
But even in that, there's only, I think over in that hotel zone on Larch, there's only one short-term rental out of all those.
So that's why, like, the lodges are individually owned, but they can be rented out kind of.
That's a
like-
hotel zone.
That's a hotel zone, yeah,
Yes, it's a hotels.
right.
Yeah, and I want to point out, if you go all the way back when Jeff was talking about the second homeowners, that's nearly half the homes, or maybe a little over half the homes in Cannon Beach combined. So if you tried to figure out the density by including those, then that's just a huge number.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't be trying to calculate in density of second home ownership. Any sort of analysis we would be doing would just be looking at licensed short-term rentals.
Makes sense.
That
Yeah.
sounds good.
And Jeff gave us all those numbers quite a while back. So they're somewhere in our documents.
I think one of the things that's not in here that's an interesting thing about geographic and proximity of rentals. And I'm running into this now. We've had a rental above the hardware store for years. There is no provision in the ordinance in the commercial zone to have a short-term rental.
It's grandfathered in.
Right, but I'm being told, no, it's not, that they're not going to be renewed. And
As a 14-day or 5?
as a 14, they're in a 5-year now. But they will not be renewed. What I'm being told is they will not be renewed as a 14-day because there's no provision in this in the commercial zone.
I was told that they aren't zoned commercial, that they are zoned differently.
Well,
So-
the short-term rentals aren't permitted in commercial zoning.
Right. And so that's where that, it doesn't say they're not, it just doesn't say they are.
Yeah.
There's the gray area. Because this one historically for 15 years has been a short-term rental.
And so
Yeah.
now will it have to be a long-term rental?
If you can get somebody that wants to live above the hardware store with the fan and the kitchen
The noise.
and the noise.
But maybe free burgers, come on.
So
Smoking on the patio. yeah.
smoking on the patio, it's not, yeah.
It's what should be, it is where a short-term rental should be, okay? I'm
Yes.
sorry.
Yes.
And I, like I say, I've kind of talked to some people, so I don't know about the zoning. I'm sure you know more than I do. But that is a case of where they should be able to come and appeal. That isn't, no one's going to live there, okay? It is,
Well, workers might,
um,
the cooks and stuff
and-
might.
Anne Marie's place is a short-term rental. Isn't
No,
it
it's-
on the same?
No, it's not. It is
Okay.
not a short-term rental. It was built to be one, but the city
Okay.
denied the license.
Okay.
So that's
Because-
one of the things that I think that needs to be looked at is commercial zones as well.
I feel like you look all over town and the upstairs now are all used for storage, but back in the day, that's where the owners lived or, and their manager might have lived, but.
Maybe, not a lot of them have been storage for a really long time,
Long time.
for production areas.
But when it was built, I guess I'm thinking,
Well, maybe back in the sixties,
oh, I mean, farther back than that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
a little different world back then.
yeah.
Okay, anything else about density caps? Moving on. This is something we don't, this is kind of an issue that could be getting talked about through a legislative change would be potential modifications to the penalties. As far as how those are applied, first, second, third, fourth, and what the penalty per violation would be.
Well, these were rewritten just a few years ago,
Mhm.
probably 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Maybe 6.
I'd say 5.
And I think that'd be something where there might be a discussion as far as how effective they are. Are they working? Are they getting the desired result when we apply them? Is it an effective type of strategy to apply?
I guess the question would be, how often has any of that happened?
Or the question could be, how often has that been followed through on? I mean, it may have
Should it
but
happen?
not been followed through, should it have happened? Because as far as I'm concerned, the penalties listed under B are BS. They should be for one violation within a 24-month period, a warning notice, give me a break. I mean, that's if it should be one violation within a 6-month period. And if you have a second violation within that 6-month period, then you need to have a much, not a suspension of your permit for 30 days, but your suspension of a permit for a year. I mean, it's just, there's no excuse if you do it twice. It's like drunk driving, your first one you can get out of kind of, but the second time you do it, you are up a creek, as far as having your driving license suspended and paying all these fines. The same thing here. I mean, people should be held accountable for their actions. It's not like kindergarten. It should be, you have a short-term rental, you abide by the rules. If you don't, and if you rent it out without a permit, or you do, or violate the number of people that are supposed to be in it, or any of those things, that's it. It's not a right. I think it's a privilege to be able to short-term rent your house.
It does seem like something we've talked about before and agreed that they need to be stiff. Especially maybe the first one, so the second one doesn't occur.
But just shorten the period of time for the first one. And then if you do a second one within a shorter period of time, then you get you know, more than just a no, 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 you know.
Another question is, we're saying violations. We had, of course, we go back to Jenny's problem last year. Does it need to be a separate violation in each time, or a continuation, or should it be a complaint? Not of, I mean, I know that Luke's hands are tied, but it takes 30 days. I mean, there's a very long, he has a long lead time of when they have to respond and conform. I think, you correct me, Luke. It isn't like you can get in trouble and then 2 weeks later you're in trouble again. It's a big process, and I don't think it's effective.
I think
Yeah.
when he says violations, doesn't he mean he gets a call for a noise complaint? He
Right.
goes, there's a lot of noise, that's a violation. Period. I mean, that it is a violation.
And a noise complaint, but if it's a complaint for renting it illegally,
Yeah.
Luke
A
has
noise complaint wouldn't be a violation of this chapter in my understanding of the code. That would be a different chapter of the code. This, I think, would pertain to like over renting or exceeding your occupancy or not having a license. Those would be violations in my reading of the code.
One thing, having worked in code enforcement before coming here, I would be very cautious about the distinction with complaint versus violation. Because the thing is that if you have it as complaints, then hypothetically, you could have 3 complaints that were never substantiated, but
Right.
there are 3 complaints, 3 strikes, you're out, even though none of those ever got substantiated. So I think we get into a bit of a due process issue if we're basing it simply on complaints versus documented violations.
And this
Agreed.
says violations, at least what I'm reading, it doesn't say complaints.
Right,
says
but I
violation.
said that. But Luke, do you think there's something we can do about how you can address it? I know you're doing your best, don't get me wrong, but is there anything you can do to shorten the length of time? Because we know that you give them 30 days or it's strung out, the response time. Can we shorten their response time to fix a problem?
The 30 days, I don't know if I always give everyone 30 days to respond to me or something like that. If there is a violation, or I guess if there's a violation, no, I'll try and make contact with the property owner to issue them their warning, even if they have, 4 active violations. Say they're like overbooking and people aren't parking where they're supposed to, and they're exceeding their maximum. In my reading, they should get a warning for all that they're doing wrong. And that would be my first contact with them. My next contact with them would be the 1 month suspension or whatever it is.
But if they kept doing all 3 of those things, wouldn't that be 3 violations?
Yeah, but so
But it would
their
be
first
one.
gross violation would be
Right.
the accumulation of all of them. Yeah. And so that's one thing that we've come across where it's like this short-term rental is violating, or has violated or something like that, these things. The first time I contact them, I would put them on notice 1 or whatever it is there, the warning.
I mean, because what you're doing, if you say complaint, you're opening it up to say, well, gee, I'm just going to complain.
Right.
And the county actually,
Due process.
in the new county ordinance, there is actually repercussion for people who complain for that make up violations.
Well, I think that
I
at
don't
least
think
that-
anyone's talking about complaints.
So,
Isn't even on the table. What's
Right.
on the table is violations. I don't know why we're even talking about complaints. You're not guilty just because somebody complains.
Right.
It's because I brought it up. We can ignore it. We can ignore it.
The 30 days thing you had mentioned, Lynn. So if someone does complain that someone is overbooking their rental or something like that, it does take time for me to monitor that property to determine if there is something like that going on. So that will take time because there's not really, unless in our software it shows that they are overbooking, it's hard for me to substantiate if it actually happened or not. So that does take time.
Well, yeah, because family and friends of the owner can still use the property in spite of Because it has the time out, but they can use the property.
Okay, yeah, yeah,
And they can, as an owner, you can
The
still
owner,
have as
yeah.
many people as you want
Yeah.
on a property.
right.
I will tell you from personal experience, we did have one that was overbooked. I mean, not too many reservations, but too many people. And within 2 hours, we evicted them.
Yep.
I mean, we don't
love you guys.
mess
Brian,
around.
you're the shining star. We know everybody.
So
can't think like you.
I took a couple family from California and sent them packing that afternoon, 4 hours after check-in. Because they were in violation.
Can't do it. I mean,
No.
make them leave.
I would say family, not friends. No additional occupancy with the exception of the property owner. I would extend that to the family. If you're letting friends in there, I think that's.
Well, if you're with the owner, that's what we're saying. No,
Also, if there's the way you block it, the friends can come in on an outside of a block.
For sure,
And then you can start after that.
for sure.
Mhm.
So there is ways for friends to get kind of involved and mixed in.
Yeah,
It's the same, yeah.
And I don't think the rental companies have a problem because y'all are professionals. It's just the rent them yourself people that can't quite figure it out.
So I have a question on logistics. It's actually both sides of this question because I don't work in the industry, so I don't, or the enforcement side of it. So let me pose my question and see if it can be clarified for me. So these are suspensions. If I'm renting my house and I have it booked for the next 6 months solid and I'm in violation, what happens to those bookings? You just lose all of that? You got to evict all those people out of their booking?
yep.
Yeah. So this seems like a logistic nightmare to try to enforce, actually. From
yeah, there'd
how
be
does
lawsuits.
our local police enforce that? It just seems difficult to me.
Well, I think, Jim, what'll happen is that over a very short period of time, there'll probably be some lawsuits flying in all kinds of directions in that situation.
Yeah.
Because everybody's under contract.
But not
Yeah.
not
The
against,
police will not be evicting anyone out of a house.
between the parties themselves is where the lawsuits happen, not
Yeah,
city isn't
That could be a
involved.
civil issue.
If the city's code is clear and you can understand it, then the city is not,
I'm not
responsible.
suggesting, Lisa, I'm not suggesting the city's going to be involved with that. All they could be on the peripheral anyway, because you can. But I'm thinking the homeowner, the renters, if there's a professional company involved, however that happens, whether it's an Airbnb, however it happens, it'll become an illegal entanglement, most likely, because there's contracts everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's tough I'll tell you, it's tough coming out of these 5-year programs,
Oh, God.
management companies, because we just had a mistake 2 days ago where we booked a house back to back and we had to move a guest from that house because the house would have been in violation. Because it was on that borderline of, it was a 5-year and now it's a 14-day. 14-day makes this the most difficult thing to manage.
Right.
So would you prefer a financial fine versus suspension? Or do you think that would be better? I mean, it would be huge because a $500 fine isn't even one night.
Yeah.
No.
$500 fine's kind of meaningless.
No.
Right? Yeah.
No, it needs a financial is, yeah.
But do you think that would be better than the,
I think a financial fine is actually a little more effective because it's immediate.
say, like $5,000?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think if you went that route, then you do equal to the night's rental of the violation. So in the summer, they're going to be paying a lot more than if they violate in the winter.
Good point, Jim.
That's a good point.
Well, they shouldn't have to violate in the winter so much.
Well, and
It's actually harder to manage in the winter
Sure.
than it is in the summer. Because
Up in the summer.
in the summer, we're week on, week off, week on, week off. It's
Yeah.
easy to manage. The winter,
That's where it kills you.
it's real easy to be off a day or two in the winter with the 14-day license.
And there's been discussion of opening that up during the winter to be a little wider so that there's maybe less oversight for the 14 days during, November to March, was that what?
Yeah, I think it was the 1st of March before spring break.
Spring break.
Yep.
Where, you know, nobody's really renting them anyway. If you get a couple of rentals in a month, you're doing really well on any particular house at that time of year. And so there has been a lot of discussion about opening it up because it's so hard to track those months and keep them legal.
Well, and you're probably not requiring close to the 2-week rental.
You know, you do 2 to 3 night stays and, yeah, people are.
Who's talking? I'm sorry, I can't see the people. Somebody is who just finished talking. Who is that?
It's Linda.
Linda,
Okay, I just can't see you, so I can't tell.
but,
I'm here.
but yeah, the 14-day is really hard to manage in the winter.
Yep.
It's really difficult because it really becomes more of a 21-day than a 14-day. Period. So.
Okay, anything else on this before moving on?
I will say, I wrote a letter to the editor of the Gazette saying I thought it would be really good to have an article about how to do the complaint form, where to find it, what needs to be on it, what is, you know, and they haven't ever gotten back or obviously written anything about it, because I feel like, you know, you walk around town, people are complaining, but then they don't do it to the right forum. So we don't get the numbers, you don't get the information. I think it would be a great article in the Gazette.
Before we move on, did we want to make any amendments to the time period? Like the first violation is 24 months. Jenny, I think, said she thought that was too long. Do we have a comment on that?
Well,
I mean,
I'm thinking that we've had good discussion on it and let the notes go back to Jeff and see where Jeff takes it from there would be my suggestion.
Well, I had one question from Lisa's comments of making it a 6-month period. In my understanding, if somebody has a violation and it's a 6-month and they go 6 months and then have another violation, that's not within the 6-month violation. So that actually shortens the time frame for people to get in trouble. If we leave it at 24-month period, it would probably catch more violations. Is that my understanding, or am I misunderstanding that?
See, I guess I'm understanding it exactly the opposite of what you're saying, but to tell you the truth, I'm not sure. I'm saying that they shouldn't be allowed to go a whole 2 years.
Picking up violations.
No, I think they're looking at if they're violating 4 times within two years, then they're at the trouble. This would prevent people over the long term creating more violations. Whereas if that window was shorter, they could have a violation past the window and start over.
Yep, I hear what you're saying, Jim.
Be their second violation. So in other words, if they had a violation and then 6 months later had a second violation, they don't, that would be, they would go into tier 2.
No, I understand what
No.
you're saying, but the way I read it, that's not within 6 months. So they go back to 0
No.
after 6 months.
Correct. If all the time periods are changed to 6 months, then yes, the clock would reset after 6 months. Now, if you had like a Russian nesting doll style system where you had increasing time periods, so 6 months, 1 year, 18 months, 24 months, as far as first, second, third, fourth, then you would have a time period that can kind of capture the time below it, if that makes sense.
Sure, well, that actually does.
Yeah. But then if we leave it at 24 for all of them, then it captures it all.
But I think what Lisa was also saying is that the penalty should be more than 30 days, that should be 60 days.
Right, I was saying that as well. I was
Right.
saying that you don't get if you commit another, okay. That's what, yeah, I'm saying that as well, that the actual penalties themselves, a suspension for 30 days is nothing. I think they should be suspended for a lot longer period of time for a second violation.
Right.
Because a warning is fine for a first time. Everyone makes a mistake. People make mistakes all the time. So you've got to account for that. The second time isn't a mistake. Okay, the second time you've already been warned, you've been informed or should have informed yourself of what the regulations are. So that, as far as I'm concerned, you're culpable of, a purposeful and not a mistake, a purposeful violation. And therefore you should have a significant penalty for that.
I thought too, Linda, wasn't there, I thought in the violations in the structure at some point, there was a spot where if you had so many violations, you could either pay the fine or you could come to a management company.
Correct,
Okay.
because we picked up one of those.
I was going to say you picked up one.
Yeah, they didn't pay the fine. They came to us and they were with us a couple of years and sold their house.
Right.
Yeah,
Well, he was on task force.
yes.
That's not a bad idea. Second violation, you have to be managed by a management company.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's happened.
That's a pretty good substantial fine, actually.
I think it's
Yeah.
in here somewhere.
Okay, yes, we voted for that.
That I would be fine with that because no, seriously, that would solve the
agree.
problem. It would solve the problem in all ways.
Okay, anything else for penalties? Moving on then. So in the last meeting, there was some discussion about the financial contributions of short-term rentals, and this tracks for the last 4 fiscal years. So that is defined as July 1st through June 30th. The last 4 fiscal years for the lifetime, 5-year, 14 days, and also the combination of those 3. And so you can see in 2019 where the numbers were. There obviously was a little bit of a dip in 2020, and then there's been some recovery since 2021 through 2022, especially between 2020 and 2021. And then moving into, this also shows what has been collected in terms of transient tax revenue from those types. So this doesn't include permitting fees or anything like that. This is just the transient tax collection.
Mhm.
And then this compares the transient tax collection from short-term rentals, represented as the yellow, to the transient taxes collected by the city as a whole, which is represented in the blue on the graph on the right. And so you can see that they are a relatively small contributor financially when compared to the hotels. We're getting up to about 15%.
The one thing that I'd be interested to see in this and almost, because there are properties that I think are being considered hotel that are actually managed as short-term rentals. Sandcastle condos, Venice Sands. Those properties are coming out of the short-term rentals because they only have a business license, because they're in the hotel zone. Those numbers get put in here as well. The lodges, for example.
But the lodges, they're all treated as short-term rentals.
But the taxes go ahead.
Other than ones that become full-time rental residents now,
Right.
because the value of the properties were such that
Yeah.
it was thought of.
So you're saying they're blue, but really they should be orange?
Yeah.
Correct.
Well, everything's counted in the blue, including the short-term rentals. So this is just showing proportionally what the,
Okay, so that's everything, that's not just hotels.
correct, that's everything. So that's short-term rentals, hotels, resorts, you name it. So the stuff that individually comes from short-term rentals is represented in gold to compare just, where it sits. And like I said, we're getting maximum about 15% of the total transient tax revenue coming from them. And then this goes into a little bit of a breakdown as far as the revenue per unit by type, and also the tax revenue by night. by type.
I'm sorry, what is the second number there?
The second number is the per night revenue by type.
Okay.
So that's how much tax you're collecting per night.
Correct.
Okay. Which is how I would see it, because the 14 days is a much larger percentage of the rentals.
Absolutely, the 5 years are falling off.
Mhm.
Yeah, the 5 years, I think probably within the next year, I don't think they're going to be around. Or if they are,
2024, I think is my last one.
I got the last one.
Yeah, you did. Yeah.
Did you guys arm wrestle for it?
No, she was managing it. And they,
yeah, because they're kind of an endangered species already, but
It'll be sold practically as soon as it's done.
yeah, sure.
okay. And then a few other things that we discussed. We're also going to be having a little bit of public commentary about this. One of the things we talked about in last night or the last meeting, last quarter's meeting, was recreational fires and burning. And this is what the current language is regarding recreational fires. The standards as far as what you can burn, proximity to structures, attendance of fires, and also the prohibition of open fires larger than 3 feet in dimension.
And this is the same for everybody.
Correct. This is a citywide ordinance regarding.
Yeah, you can't really,
Right, I remember talking about that last.
yeah.
I'll have some comments on that. So whenever we're.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I forgot your name, but
Wait,
Steve. So Steve, whenever you're ready.
okay. Right now then seems like a good time to intervene. So first of all, thank you very much for allowing me to put my 2 cents in a few times here. I really appreciate your patience. My name is Steve Waite, lived in Cannon Beach several years, born on the West Coast, and consider that my home, and I'll probably die on the West Coast. So thank you very much. I also appreciate you all volunteering your time. It's folks like you and all the volunteers for Cannon Beach that make this place a nicer place to live. It's a real contribution to the city. So my comments today have to do with fire pits at short-term rental units. I'll just read some from some of my notes here. I believe that if nothing else, we should be vigilant about the safety of Cannon Beach, and this includes wildfires. So some of the experience that I've had in my neighborhood with short-term rental units is that the folks that come from wherever they come from, stay here 2 weeks, typically light a fire almost every night. Contrast that with the owners or even part-time owners that come here. They're much more respectful of the safety of Cannon Beach and of the surrounding neighborhood and the smoke that it emits. So the fire pits promote are much greater risk used by the short-term rental units than by the property owners. Often they're burned nightly with little supervision or regard for safety of the forest we live in. And often excessive drinking or some partying is going on with that. So they may not be paying attention to the fire pits. Cannon Beach is not immune from wildfires. In fact, the last few weeks, we've had a couple close to Cannon Beach, one on Tillamook Head and then one on mile marker 38, approximately 38. And as I understand it right now, there's a ban on fires. I didn't see that it had been lifted, but I did see that it
It has been lifted.
has it recently lifted. And we are not immune. Take, for instance, Paradise, California, or Lake Tahoe. The last couple of years that were Paradise was destroyed, and Lake Tahoe almost destroyed last year. And I believe we should take into consideration the safety of Cannon Beach from the overzealous nature of short-term rental units and building these pit fires. Also protects the health of everyone that breathes. We will reduce air pollution, especially in the neighborhoods where smoke can become very concentrated. We have some low-lying neighborhoods where fog tends to settle as well. That smoke also tends to settle in those areas. The lot size of Cannon Beach is pretty small, and most of the ones, at least west of the highway, a lot of those lots are small. So no matter where you put a fire pit, on that small lot, it's close to somebody's other property line. The fire pit smoke is not dispersed like chimney smoke. The chimney smoke emits smoke above the roof line, so it's less apt to enter the home and it's more effectively dispersed. And smoke from the outdoor fire pits, because it is low lying, enters neighboring homes, and most of the folks in Cannon Beach do not have air conditioning and rely on open windows to cool their homes, especially in the summertime when a lot of those fires are started, and that smoke enters in there, so you have to close the windows, which heats up the house, and so it goes. I believe that this code change would be easily enforceable by notifying the property management companies of the change. We do a lot to accommodate short-term visitors, spending millions of dollars on services, utilities, and infrastructure. Guests are welcome, but I don't believe we should prioritize the safety of our city and the quality of life by the visitors should not be prioritized over the quality of life. And visitors don't come to Cannon Beach for the fire pits. I've never heard anybody say I'm going there because I want to build a fire in the back of my rental unit. You come for the beautiful sights, trees, beach, nature, and etc. I believe this is a quality of life issue for Cannon Beach residents, and that many visitors don't consider the effect their outdoor fire has on the surrounding neighbors. I find it ironic that many of the visitors to Cannon Beach come to escape the smoke and the pollution and the heat of their home cities. And then the first thing they want to do is come here and light a fire and put our city in danger of a wildfire and create a lot of smoke in the area. I suggest that if visitors want to enjoy a fire, they can do so on the beach where the smoke is dispersed before entering the neighborhoods. And this is, of course, for the short-term rental units only and does not affect the owners. The owners I find to be much more considerate. They have an investment in Cannon Beach. They usually know their neighbors and they're considered their neighbors and haven't been lighting fires every night. I also believe that this is low-hanging fruit, and looking at your mission statement, it's very clear that this aligns very nicely with what the mission statement is for the short-term task force. Also, I've got several pages of petition signatures here, but I'll share those with you in just a moment. But to a person, everyone that signed the petitions pages had no idea that there was an online complaint form for short-term rental. They were ignorant of that, or they would have gone out, I'm sure, several times and complained about one thing or other, or the term of their residency here in Canada. There's an old adage that says the best time to enact good public policy is 20 years ago, and the second best time is right now. So I hope to take advantage of changing policy on this to protect Cannon Beach going forward. Lastly, the last thing I want is for Cannon Beach to become a hotel room. I want people who are here who are primarily invested in Cannon Beach and the long-term success and quality of life in Cannon Beach, and not to expand the number of short-term rentals so that the city does not become a hotel room, more or less. Thanks very much. If you have any questions, pushback, comments, I'd like to address those.
I'm curious, you say you have a petition with that people signed for these points that you made?
Yes.
And what were they signing exactly? Could you read that to us?
Sure. Petition to ban short-term fire pits, petition to ban fire pits at short-term rental units in Cannon Beach. Short-term rental vacation unit fire pits have become a nuisance to residents, resulting in their having to close windows and inability to breathe clean air. These fire pits are often burned every night, resulting in continuing problems. We believe this is a quality of life issue for residents of Cannon Beach, and that many visitors don't consider the effect their outdoor fire has on the surrounding neighborhoods. It's ironic that many visitors come to Cannon Beach to escape air pollution and smoke in their home city, find it perfectly acceptable to pollute the air in Cannon Beach. I suggest that if visitors want to enjoy a fire, they do so on the beach where the smoke is dispersed before entering the neighborhoods. We, the undersigned, are concerned citizens, urge our leaders to act now to reduce air pollution and fire danger by banning the use of fire pits by short-term rental units. And I've got several pages of signatures here.
Is that possible? Can that be put on the website so that everyone can see
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, I can scan that and put it on the website.
Okay, because I mean, I think that's well, thank you for doing that. I mean, that's a lot of work.
Well, it really wasn't. I didn't really work too hard to get these 5 or 6 pages of signatures. There wasn't, with one exception, everybody wanted to sign this, and I didn't really go out of my way, no door to door, didn't sit at the recycle center or the post office or anything. These are just people that I casually know, or some from my friends, some of them I don't know. But it was very easy to gather these signatures, and like I said, I didn't put much effort into it because I think this is an issue that is universal and the concern of people who live here. We all experience the smoke and the pollution and wanting to open our windows, and none of us want the place to burn down, that's for sure.
Right.
There's that moss that's up in the trees, it gets so dry that all it takes is an ember floating up, landing on that piece of moss, and you could have a fire, and they spread very quickly, as we know from watching the news, for instance.
Right. And the other thing that bothers me is that you said that so many people don't know about the complaint form. And I believe that. And I don't know exactly how that needs to be addressed. I know that, at every meeting, there's reference to the city website. At every one of our meetings, at the council meetings, at the planning commission meetings, there's always some kind of peripheral mention of the website. But I just don't think that people are aware that there is a complaint form on the website that's easy to use. And I think that once that people are aware of that, we're going to see quite an uptick on the number of complaints that are filed. So I think we have to think about a way to make sure that people know about that, because if people don't know, it's worthless,
I do want to say that one exception, and the person I asked to sign this but didn't, it wasn't because they disagreed with this, it was because they had a conflict of interest. They actually worked for the city and felt like that they wanted to be more neutral on it.
Well, actually, I haven't really experienced the problem. I live right across from the RV park where every single one of them is building a fire every night, but it doesn't really come up with the berm, I guess.
Actually, I thank you for all your information. It's very helpful.
Thank you.
I have a fire pit across the street from me that's a full-time residence, and they use it all the time on the summer. And it's one of those questions I've actually thought about asking. There is something about smoke going to a neighbor's house, I think, in the ordinance.
There could be, yeah, I'd have to double
I
check.
think there
things.
is. I mean, it relates to burn barrels primarily, but I think it could be easily expanded to smoke. I mean, I get smoke from the beach. I'm 2 blocks away.
Right.
And, I still get smoke from the beach. So it disperses right up to my house. So,
Don't get me wrong, I'm not for fires on the beach either.
yeah,
I'm saying that's a more easily dispersed out
Yes,
there.
yeah.
So I've got rental right behind me, and a couple scattered in the neighborhood, and the one right behind me, they'll come in, they'll make a big fire, and I've even asked them to be considerate, and with no good results from that. And the fire from their backyard into my area and that whole area, they let it smolder all night long.
Yeah, that's
Mhm. That's a problem.
That's a problem.
Water.
That's a problem.
Seems like it might be better to try to deal with the smoke going
I think it's a smoke issue.
Versus- versus
Because
fire.
not just short-term rentals is what I'm saying.
Right, but I do think that the full-time residents who know their neighbors and have a long-term investment in Cannon Beach, in my experience, that they're a little bit more considerate.
It's not been my experience.
So I think both experiences happen, but is smoke, I mean, you're talking about nuisance, what's called a nuisance with
Yes.
smoke.
Yes.
And that is there's a whole big body of nuisance law, I don't know what Cannon Beach's nuisance laws are and to what extent they're enforced, but
Oh, well, I'm not sure it's under the nuisance laws here, but I think it's under burn bans and I'm not burn bans, but burn barrels and yard waste, yard burning.
okay.
There is.
But it
used to be
says-
something there.
No fire of any type shall produce smoke or odors that are toxic or noxious or that create public nuisance or safety or health hazard to the surrounding area. So you can,
There-
It kind of is
Sorry.
the ban right there.
there you go.
And it would not target one part of the population.
Correct.
It would target everyone.
But we
Well,
don't.
not the population though, that's the thing. They are visitors.
Yeah, but it's,
Yeah, but
I can't believe it would be,
you can deal with it.
right.
I mean, you have the opportunity, you call this gentleman right here and say, it's not a violation, the sense of the violations we're talking about earlier, as far as the timing and use of the property is concerned, as far as the number of people and the parking and that sort of thing. But it is a nuisance just the same. It would fall like the noise would.
Yeah.
I would assume.
That's like a noise complaint and it would affect everybody.
It's even.
Yep.
Across the board. So like my neighbor, who is a full-time person, whose smoke comes right up to my house, I'd have to say, and we don't actually see eye to eye for various reasons, but I would say, okay, would you please go talk to them and have them put that fire out tonight? Because it's coming, the wind direction is driving it right at me.
Yeah, which is more easily enforceable though, telling the property management companies that fire burning is not allowed in a permit pit on short-term rental units or calling the officers every time.
Well, I'm not sure what the answer is to that. I'm throwing out
Yeah,
the,
that was rhetorical.
I'm not, I think it's a thing for discussion, sure, but I think the more broadly that you diversify these things across the entire community, the more likely you're going to have a real effect than just focusing on a particular thing. You have a nuisance law that you could call the police and say, okay, this is a problem. You can call the property manager and do the same thing. Property manager, if it's a property manager, they're going to step in anyway because they don't want the complaint.
I mean, we
They
found
don't want
on
unhappy people.
our committee that the property management properties aren't the problem.
Yeah,
It's,
No, I'm not saying the property
Right.
management companies are the problem. What I'm
Right.
saying is the issue results from overzealous visitors who come here for 2 weeks and want to build a fire every single night. So, and in fact, Linda, to your point, the police were called when I stuck my head over the fence and I said, this is after the 11th night in a row that they built a fire right close to the property line, my backyard property line. And I said, would you mind if you didn't build a fire tonight? This was one of the hotter days in the summer.
sure.
I want to leave my windows open tonight, and when your fire's going until smoldering till 1, 2 a.m., I can't open my windows until it's out.
Right. Something.
And they were drinking, and they called me over to want to fight with me. They ended up calling the police that I was bothering them after asking them to be considerate. And the officer showed up and said, please leave them alone because they have every right to build that fire. So that's what prompted this.
Sure.
And apparently he didn't know, and I didn't know about the nuisance law for the barrel burning or the fire pits, the smoke. And I'm glad to know that, educated to that today. But that's what prompted this whole thing is that incident.
And maybe the thing to do in that, because it's a particular incident, and I don't know how often this happens. I don't have a clue if this is a common occurrence or whether you're on the focus because of your situation. Talk to that property manager and say, this is a problem. I'm going to continue to complain to the police. Do you really want that to happen?
So the owner's going to pick from time to time. I'm friends with the owner.
Sure.
Well, not acquaintances with the owner.
Right.
Because he doesn't do anything to try and tamp down the fire pit thing. But I've spoken to him about it and the incident that I had with one of the visitors.
Mhm.
is the fire pit within 10 feet of your house or their house?
Not the house, no, the property line maybe. I haven't taken exact measurements, but it's close to 10 feet.
Well, you need to call the police first next time.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree.
Put it on speed dial. I'm serious. That
Thank you, Papa
story
Ballard. I'm not
story
trying to.
is so.
No, I think this is more commonplace than just me. I mean, not everybody that signed these, said that they have had smoke, but a full 30 or 40% said, yeah, this is an issue, you know?
With the fire pit. I didn't know there were that many fire pits.
Yeah, I'm trying to think how many fire pits we have, and
Not sure we have any.
I know an owner that got rid of one.
I know
Um,
two owners got rid of.
Yeah, I've gotten rid of them. I've got a couple that have gas fires
Yeah.
outside, but not wood burning.
Here, propane tanks and the gas.
There's fire pits on Main Street. There's plenty of fire pits, and I just, yeah, I'm really.
At least I'm not disagreeing that there's fire pits. I'm just trying to go through my inventory of my homes and think of how many fire pits we actually have.
See, I'm the same way. I don't think that we have fire pits.
Yeah,
There might be one. I don't know. Look.
More reason to ban them then.
yeah, well, yeah.
I mean, that's what I'm saying is it's, if it's across town, it's probably not the short-term rentals is my consideration. I mean, it is in your case, clearly. But across town, it's probably not that big an issue because it's the full-time people like my guy across the street who, brings out his fans.
We're not going to solve that issue. We're certainly not going to solve that issue at this meeting, but I think it's probably both.
Yeah, and I'm not against banning fire pits citywide because I agree the fire danger is,
Extreme.
it's extreme.
I don't like fire pits, so
Yeah.
I mean, we've never encouraged them.
Right, never mind the smoke. The smoke is a real nuisance, but it's also a fire danger. So
Sure, absolutely.
Where I come from, everybody's using those solo stoves.
Yeah.
Because they don't
Gas.
produce, no, they're not gas, but the way they're configured, they don't.
They don't produce smoke. Yeah,
They're very efficient stainless steel build.
Right.
A lot of ventilation.
And they have them at Costco now.
yeah, that's there's some definite areas that you could still have a fire
Right.
safely in a solo stove, a propane type situation, but an open fire pit is, yeah.
Problem looking for.
Oh, I really appreciate you guys' time and consideration on this, honestly. Thank you.
No, thank you.
All right, then moving on, are there any other legislative amendment ideas to discuss?
I just want to say one thing to the fellow who just spoke. I think that you should also address, I think you should address the city council with that issue as well.
Mhm.
Directly. Are you still there?
Yes, I'll wait till after January 1st, Lisa.
That didn't sound good. No, but I'm serious. It is an issue that it's not just a short-term rental issue. It's a bigger issue than that.
Thank you.
All right, and I think that brings us to the end of the presentation.
We know what our next date.
3 months out.
Seventh of March.
Lynn, do you have the next date for the meeting in your mind?
No, I haven't been doing that. It'll be the first Tuesday of the month. Isn't it? And it's
Yeah, it'd be March 7th then.
March 7th.
When's spring break for Oregon schools?
Yeah, it's all over the place.
There's so many of them.
There's 6 weeks of it.
I thought
In
Oregon-
Washington schools.
Oregon has pretty much one, except for the universities, but Washington has 2 or 3, and then there's Idaho.
It typically starts mid-March and goes through the end of April.
Yep.
Okay.
I felt like this was one of our better meetings.
I do too. We covered a lot of topics. No, it was good. Interesting discussion and everything. It was great.
Right.
All right, well, if there's nothing else, then the meeting is adjourned.
All right,
Thank
thank
you
you.
for being here.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for being here.
Of course.
Well,
The recording has stopped.
And Brian,